The human landing craft hummed as it descended through the lavender skies of Virlia, a planet that seemed to float in perpetual dusk, its twin suns stretching long shadows across the city below. The soldiers inside shifted nervously, their boots squeaking against the polished metal floor as the vessel rumbled over energy fields that pulsed like veins of living light. Captain Orlin, the tallest of the group with a jaw that refused to relax, cleared his throat and barked orders that immediately collided with the odd physics of the craft, making some soldiers stumble over their own laces as if gravity had decided to prank them. The others laughed nervously, pretending to be confident, but a low hum of anxiety vibrated in the air, mingling with the craft's artificial heartbeat. As the ramp lowered, the city sprawled beneath them, a labyrinth of shimmering towers, floating walkways, and translucent streets that glowed faintly with energy currents. Alien pedestrians drifted through the air, legs crossed in mid-stride, and some moved with the effortless grace of creatures untethered by Earth's physics. The soldiers' heavy boots thudded clumsily against the landing platform, drawing a few curious glances that quickly dissolved into laughter from a group gathered on a nearby balcony. They were alien women, their forms human-like but with ears elongated and pointed, twitching like antennae with each expression. Their hair rippled in colors that defied description, somewhere between molten silver and liquid violet, catching the light of the setting suns as they laughed, eyes sparkling with amusement. "Look at them," one of the aliens said, her voice melodic, like chimes caught in a gentle wind. "Do they always march like that, or is this some kind of ritual?" Her companion snorted, long ears quivering. "I think it's a mating display, heavy stomps and awkward gestures, very intimidating." The soldiers froze, unsure if they had been insulted, or if they were about to be invited to an alien festival. Private Hark, the one who carried his helmet under one arm like a newborn puppy, tried to answer. We are soldiers, yes, very intimidating." The words stumbled out of his mouth like pebbles rolling downhill, and his companions snickered behind him. The aliens laughed louder, a sound that filled the plaza with sparkling echoes. One of them leaned over the balcony and flicked a small orb that floated midair, bouncing it toward the soldiers. It zipped past their faces with alarming speed, and Corporal Stain instinctively ducked, tripping over his own foot and landing flat on his back with a dull thud. The orb bobbed gently above him, untouched, while the alien women hooted in unrestrained delight. Hark, trying to help Stain up, accidentally smacked him in the face with his own helmet. "Sorry," Hark shouted, reddening as the aliens cackled like wind chimes in a storm. Captain Orland's face tightened, but even he couldn't suppress the twitch of a smile as he watched his soldiers fumble through this alien gauntlet. "Form up," he barked, though the words lacked authority in the face of floating citizens who seemed unconcerned with military hierarchy. Amid the chaos, one soldier remained unusually calm. Lieutenant Cade, younger than the captain but with a quiet precision in his eyes, gripped the hilt of a sword strapped to his back. Unlike the others, he didn't stumble or overcompensate. He simply watched, noting the playful mischief in the alien women's movements. They twirled along the balcony, their long ears twitching with every giggle, teasing the soldiers with gestures that were equal parts challenge and invitation. Cade's gaze lingered on the subtle shifts in their weight, the way they anticipated each other's reactions, and he smiled faintly at the absurdity of it all. One of the aliens tossed a floating fruit in his direction, expecting him to flinch, but he caught it midair with a simple flick of his wrist and placed it back on the balcony, earning a momentary pause in the laughter. "You," the alien who had first spoken pointed at him, her eyes narrowing playfully. "The quiet one, you don't stumble like your friends, are you serious or just pretending?" Cade tilted his head, letting a small smirk curl at the corner of his mouth. "I take my duties seriously," he said evenly, "but I also have excellent reflexes for catching fruit." The aliens blinked, startled by the unexpected humor. One of them laughed so hard her ears twitched violently, nearly toppling the railing, and the others joined in, the melody of their mirth bouncing across the plaza. Meanwhile, the rest of the soldiers continued their clumsy attempts at decorum. Hark tried to mimic the aliens' floating gestures by leaping off the ground in a half-hearted hop, only to crash into a hovering cart of glowing beverages. The liquid splashed everywhere, coating his armor in fluorescent streaks, and he emerged looking like a neon rainbow gone terribly wrong. Stain, already embarrassed from his previous fall, muttered something under his breath and quickly slid behind a railing for cover. Even Captain Orlin, trying to regain control of the situation, found himself chuckling at the ridiculous tableau before him. The alien women, regaining composure, descended the balcony, moving with a grace that made their long ears seem almost like ribbons of liquid motion. They circled the soldiers, tilting their heads, sniffing the air, and occasionally flicking small bursts of harmless energy that made sparks sizzle along the human armor. The soldiers jumped back with exaggerated movements, and Cade raised an eyebrow at the spectacle, hiding his amusement. "They're testing us," he murmured to no one in particular, "or they think we're entertainment." "Entertainment," muttered Hark, spitting a bead of glowing liquid off his chest. "I hate entertainment." The aliens paused near Cade, who now stood quietly, sword resting lightly against his shoulder. "You," said the first alien again, "you aren't like them. You don't scream or trip or look ridiculous. You're interesting." Her ears twitched in what could almost be admiration. "Do you have a name, interesting human?" "Cade," he said simply, "Lieutenant Cade, and you are?" "Leora," she replied, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. "And these are my friends? Don't worry, we only bite sometimes." She flicked a tiny pulse of energy toward the ground, making a harmless spark leap and scurry like a miniature lightning bug. The soldiers collectively yelped, though Cade simply watched, expression calm, as if he had expected this all along. The rest of the day passed in a blur of levitating foods, misfired gadgets, and awkward attempts at alien conversation. The soldiers learned quickly that laughter here was both weapon and greeting, teasing both barrier and bridge between cultures. Cade remained an observer, occasionally stepping in to steady a soldier or catch a floating object, his movements precise, almost humorous in their unintentional elegance. The alien women continued their games, sometimes hitting targets, sometimes hitting nothing at all, and each small victory, failure, or accidental spectacle was punctuated by laughter, sometimes theirs, sometimes the humans', sometimes both. As the twin suns dipped below the city skyline, the human soldiers gathered on the plaza, weary but amused, covered in fluorescent stains and minor bruises. The alien women lingered nearby, long ears twitching, observing the humans like a puzzle that was slowly solving itself. Cade stood apart, leaning casually on his sword, and for the first time he caught the faintest hint of respect in the alien's eyes. It was quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, glinting like a star in the deepening dusk. And as laughter echoed across the glowing city, it became clear that this was only the beginning. This world, filled with challenges, ridicule, and unexpected humor, had already begun to bend around the presence of one human who moved differently than the rest, and whose sword, unnoticed for now, might one day speak louder than words or laughter. The morning light of Virlia spread across the city like liquid gold, bouncing off towers of glass and iridescent metal, and the human soldiers found themselves awake far earlier than usual, roused by a strange mixture of curiosity and lingering embarrassment from the previous day. The alien women were already there, waiting on a floating walkway, their long ears swaying like banners in a breeze that only seemed to exist for them. Leora, the one who had singled out Cade, waved them over, tossing tiny spheres of glowing energy toward the humans. Hark flinched so dramatically he fell backward into a low-gravity fountain, sending a spray of luminescent water arcing through the air. Stain rolled his eyes and muttered, "I hate mornings," but even he couldn't stop the corners of his mouth from twitching. The aliens clapped their hands together and the spheres zipped around the soldiers like mischievous fireflies. "Today," Leora announced, her voice a melody that could slice through steel, "we teach you to move like us. Or at least, to survive without looking foolish." Private Hark groaned, but Cade merely adjusted the strap of his sword, his expression calm, as if this was routine and he had nothing to fear. The soldiers followed the alien women through a series of levitating platforms that spiraled above the city. Each platform carried small challenges designed to test reflexes, balance, and coordination. Floating orbs of light darted around them, changing speed and direction unpredictably, and one of the aliens flicked a pulse of energy toward the human group. Stain instinctively leapt to the side and slammed into Hark, sending both tumbling into the next platform with a comical thud. The aliens erupted in laughter, their long ears twitching in rhythm, and Cade suppressed a chuckle, finding their antics oddly endearing. Gravity is a suggestion here, clearly, Cade murmured, catching an orb midair and passing it back to its owner with a smooth flick. The aliens paused, their amusement turning into curiosity, eyes narrowing as if studying an unfamiliar species that had learned one small trick unexpectedly fast. Leora tilted her head, the corners of her lips lifting in a smirk. Interesting, she said, and the word hung in the air like a challenge rather than praise. The next test involved floating training dummies that hovered at various heights, their limbs swinging unpredictably, sometimes retracting or elongating in sudden bursts. Stain, trying to follow the others, swung at one dummy with all his might, only to misjudge its distance and spin into a stack of smaller dummies. They toppled like dominoes, pinging off the sides of the platform in a cacophony of metal clattering and squeaking hydraulics. Hark attempted a rescue but ended up tangled in the wires, dangling upside down like a prize at a bizarre carnival. The aliens laughed so hard their floating orbs wobbled and collided midair, leaving tiny sparks to rain down like fireworks. Cade moved forward quietly, his sword in hand, and dispatched the dummies with precision. Each strike was efficient, almost elegant, cutting through the chaotic choreography the aliens had designed as a mockery of human coordination. The sound of metal striking metal, the flash of energy arcs, and the smooth flow of his movements drew the gaze of the entire group, muting the giggles momentarily. One of the alien women, the tallest of them, leaned closer, her long ears twitching sharply. He's different," she whispered, and the others' chatter faltered. Cade's eyes met hers for a brief second, calm and steady, and he offered nothing but a faint, ironic smile. A new challenge emerged as a set of energy hoops hovered in shifting patterns, pulsing with light and flickering unpredictably. The humans were expected to pass through them without touching the edges, a task that required timing, agility, and perhaps luck. Hark launched himself at the first hoop, swung wildly and ricocheted off the second, spinning into Stain, who screamed in protest as both were flung onto a platform several meters below. Cade stepped forward, measured each hoop with careful attention, and began moving through them as if he were part of a quiet dance no one else could see. His limbs flowed in perfect harmony, sword balanced casually across one shoulder, energy arcs rippling harmlessly past him. The aliens' laughter softened, replaced by low whistles of approval. Leora clapped slowly, a teasing grin still on her face, but her eyes betrayed respect. "This is getting interesting," she said, tilting her head so her hair floated slightly around her ears. "I didn't think humans could handle this." Another alien tossed a small, erratic drone into the test area, its purpose unclear but clearly designed to provoke panic. The drone zigzagged unpredictably, emitting harmless but startling bursts of blue sparks. Hark panicked immediately, spinning and running in the wrong direction, while Stain tripped over a platform edge and landed with a dramatic splash in the hovering pool below. The aliens giggled uncontrollably at the chaos, some leaning so far over their railings that their hair floated in shimmering arcs above the water. Cade, however, stepped lightly, anticipating the drone's movements. He parried its small attacks with his sword, redirecting its momentum with small taps that sent it spinning harmlessly into a floating net. The aliens froze, and for a moment, only the quiet hum of the city filled the air. Leora's eyes widened in astonishment. "That was precise," she whispered. The others murmured in agreement, their earlier amusement tinged now with admiration. One of them tilted her head, teasing, "So quiet, so sharp, and he doesn't even look like he's trying." Cade lowered his sword, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Sometimes," he said, "the best way to survive is to watch carefully and move deliberately. Panicking rarely helps." The aliens blinked, processing the statement, and one of them let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Watch carefully, move deliberately sounds boring when you say it, but impressive when you do it." The human soldiers, meanwhile, were recovering from their own comic failures. Hark wrung out his soaked uniform, muttering under his breath about energy hoops that have it out for him personally, while Stain tried to dust himself off, glaring at a floating orb that had attacked him first. Even Captain Orlin, who had been trying to maintain composure, allowed himself a small smile, clearly aware that their reputation as competent soldiers was being rebuilt, one awkward failure at a time. As the day progressed, the aliens introduced more playful challenges. Sudden bursts of low gravity, levitating platforms that rotated unpredictably, and holographic predators that darted around to test reflexes. Every time, the soldiers stumbled, flailed, or collided in ridiculous ways, prompting laughter from both sides. Cade moved quietly among the chaos, his sword an extension of his body, deflecting hazards, catching floating objects, and stabilizing his comrades without effort. The aliens began to whisper among themselves, noting his calm precision and the subtle humor in his movements. A dodge here, a flick there, an almost theatrical twist to evade a harmless hazard. By the time the twin suns began to set again, painting the city in molten hues of amber and violet, the soldiers were exhausted, soaked in alien fluids and laughing at their own absurdity. The alien women hovered nearby, long ears swaying, eyes bright with fascination and amusement. Leora stepped forward, floating lightly above the platform, and nodded toward Cade. "You're different," she said again, softer this time. "You move like a human, but with your own rhythm. The others entertaining, yes, but you interesting." Cade smiled faintly, tucking his sword into its sheath. "I suppose it's easier when you don't panic." The aliens laughed, a soft, melodic sound that echoed across the plaza, but this time it wasn't mocking. It was warm, a shared acknowledgement of skill, humor, and the strange camaraderie that had formed in the chaos of the day. Even Hark and Stain, bruised and dripping, found themselves smiling, realizing that ridicule could turn into respect, and that laughter, even at one's own expense, could build bridges that swords and armor alone could not. As night fell over Vyrlia, the glowing city lights casting shifting shadows over the floating platforms, Cade watched the aliens disappear into the cityscape, their laughter trailing behind them like starlight. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew the day's challenges were just the beginning. Somewhere beyond the games, beyond the humor and chaos, a real test awaited, a test that would demand more than balance, more than reflexes, more than laughter. And when that moment came, he would be ready. The city of Vyrlia glimmered under the pale light of its twin moons, casting long, wavy shadows over the floating platforms where the humans had spent days being teased, challenged, and humiliated. The soldiers were tense but eager this morning. The alien women were already gathered, their long ears swaying like pendulums, eyes glinting with anticipation. "Today," Leora said, her voice carrying just enough teasing bite to set everyone on edge, "we see if you're still just clumsy humans or if you've grown into something more." Hark muttered under his breath, brushing a streak of luminescent fluid from his uniform. "I've grown, all right, into a puddle of embarrassment." Stain groaned and rolled his eyes, but even he had to acknowledge that yesterday's failures had somehow turned into a strange camaraderie. Cade, calm as ever, adjusted the strap of his sword and surveyed the area. The aliens' floating platforms shimmered with energy barriers and holographic obstacles, and a new element hovered above, a rogue training drone, shaped like a spiky orb with flickering sensors and a faintly mischievous glow. It darted back and forth, clearly waiting to be provoked. The aliens laughed at the drone, long ears twitching, and one of them flicked it toward the humans. Hark screamed and ran sideways, colliding with Stain, who yelped as they both tumbled across a low-gravity field. Sparks flew from the drone, harmless but alarming, bouncing off the platform edges. The aliens cackled, clearly enjoying the chaos, but Cade remained still, his sword loose in his hand, body balanced and calm as if the world itself slowed for him. "Watch carefully," he muttered to himself and then to the others, "and don't panic, it helps more than force." Hark gave him a look that combined awe and frustration. "How are you so calm?" he whispered, narrowly dodging a spark. Cade didn't answer, he didn't need to, his movements spoke. The drone charged, flicking sparks toward the humans. Cade sidestepped with fluid precision, tapping it lightly with the flat of his blade. It ricocheted harmlessly into a containment net that floated nearby, then sprang back like a mischievous animal. Leora's eyes widened. "That's surprisingly elegant," she murmured, and the other aliens leaned closer, murmuring among themselves. Hark tripped over his own feet, hitting the low-gravity fountain with a comic splash. Stain tried to help, only to be flicked by the drone's energy burst, spinning sideways like a toy top. The aliens laughed so hard that a nearby orb of light bounced into another, sending sparks arcing over the entire platform. Even Captain Orlin exhaled audibly, shaking his head. "At least someone looks competent," he muttered, eyes on Cade. Cade moved silently, predicting the drone's shifts and calculating the angles of attack. With a subtle flick, he tapped the device again, sending it spinning in a new trajectory. Sparks shot out harmlessly, but the drone zipped toward the human group again. Hark froze, screaming as if the orb had declared war personally. Cade pivoted, sword slicing through the arc of sparks, guiding the drone with precise taps and calculated pressure points. It ricocheted from barrier to barrier, finally coming to a rest at the edge of the platform, immobilized. A stunned silence fell. The aliens blinked, mouths slightly open, ears stiffening in disbelief. Leora floated closer, eyes wide. You actually handled it, and with style." She blinked, then smiled. "I didn't expect that." Her friends murmured agreement, nudging each other, long ears twitching with the new realization that the quiet human soldier was more than he seemed. Hark collapsed onto the platform, still shaking. I can't believe he did that," he said weakly. Stain sat nearby, wiping a smear of glowing liquid from his cheek, muttering, "I've officially lost all street cred." Even Captain Orlin exhaled, a faint smile breaking through his usual stoicism. The aliens approached the humans, hovering gracefully on their platforms. Leora's expression softened, playful but no longer mocking. "You've changed," she said, her voice carrying across the plaza. "At first you were amusing, awkward, clumsy, entertaining." She tilted her head, long ears swaying. "Now you are someone to be respected." Cade simply nodded, letting the sword rest lightly at his side. "I learned," he said quietly. "I learned that rushing, panicking, or trying to impress only makes mistakes worse. Calm observation and deliberate action get results." The aliens whispered among themselves, some nudging each other, noting the difference between him and the others. The human soldiers, despite their bruises, awkward falls, and lingering embarrassment, found themselves standing taller. Even Hark, wiping glowing fluid from his armor, cracked a grin. "Maybe we're not completely hopeless," he admitted. Stain snorted, shaking his head, but the ghost of a smile lingered. Captain Orlin clapped Cade on the shoulder. "You've earned more than skill points," he said. "You've earned respect from them and from us." The aliens laughed softly, a warm sound now, mingling with the gentle hum of the city. They nudged the humans playfully, no longer teasing cruelly but in recognition of their newfound competence. Leora floated closer to Cade, tilting her head. "You've changed the game," she said. "I didn't expect humans to surprise us." Her tone carried both amusement and acknowledgement. The soldiers looked around, realizing that the alien city no longer felt hostile or mocking. It felt alive, welcoming in a strange, vibrant way. Floating orbs blinked above, and distant towers glowed with energy that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the planet itself. Even the rogue drone, now safely immobilized, seemed almost to bow in recognition of Cade's skill. Hark, still shaking slightly, nudged Stain. "Do you think we could maybe join their training next time without exploding?" Stain chuckled, though a faint bruise marred his grin. Cade walked past them calmly, sword glinting faintly in the twin moon's light, and simply said, "Learn from mistakes and keep your eyes open." The alien women began to depart, floating effortlessly toward the central towers, but their eyes lingered on the humans, long ears twitching with quiet admiration. Leora waved, a gesture both playful and sincere. "We'll see each other again," she said, "and next time maybe you'll surprise us even more." The humans watched them disappear, the laughter of the aliens now carrying warmth rather than mockery. The plaza, once a theater of embarrassment, had become a place of shared understanding, humor, and mutual respect. Cade stood silently, sword in hand, reflecting on how much the journey had changed him. The awkwardness, the ridicule, the absurd failures, they had all been part of the process, lessons in patience, observation, and control. He had grown, not just as a